Hello, this is Reverend Don Lewis coming to you from the beautiful metaverse, and more specifically from beautiful Danville, Illinois, homeland of the Corellian tradition. And this is Midday with Reverend Don. And as you know, if you watch Midday with Reverend Don, you can type your questions or comments into whatever platform you're watching on, and they will appear here in my chat room. And we can therefore talk directly. I've often remarked that that's one of my favorite parts of this particular broadcast. Um, and Today, and hello to Reverend Michael in the chat room. It's good to see you. Today, I was going to talk about last minute election thoughts. Um, and the first and most important election thought for me is that as a person who is intimately involved in several 501c3 organizations, I'm always very careful to avoid any sort of partisan political comment that could be taken as coming from an official position. And I think that everyone who is in a legal position of clergy should also pay attention to this. And there are two reasons for it. The first one is that technically it's illegal for clergy people in 501c3 organizations to be endorsing any sort of political candidate um, or political action based on party. That doesn't mean that all political discussion is necessarily banned, but it does mean partisan discussion is. Now, we all know, of course, that certain Christian ministers do not pay any attention to this rule and never seem to have any problem when they tell their members who they should vote for. But I'm also one of the first people to condemn that practice, so I'm certainly not going to then turn around and do it myself. So the one thing I'm not going to be telling you to do um, is go out and vote for any one person or party, nor am I going to tell you who I myself would be voting for, because I don't think that's appropriate. And I think that just as the Christian community is sometimes more than laissez-faire with that legal rule, I think sometimes our pagan community can be a little iffy on it too. And I think that we need to avoid that. That does not, however, um, doesn't mean that I could not tell you where I stand on something politically if I'm clear that I'm not speaking in an official capacity. But I find that people aren't always very cautious of that. And again, I don't think it's appropriate for me to quote, telling anyone how to vote, end quote. Um, but I am completely capable of telling you what I think you should consider, and that is not breaking that rule. Um, as a religious person, working within the confines of the 501c3 regulations, I can talk about many political issues as long as it's the issue that I'm talking about and not the party. And I've talked extensively about Project 2025. And we're probably going to talk about it a little bit more today. Um, but that is not inherently a party aligned issue. Yes, on one hand, it obviously is, but it's not coming directly from that party, nor is it, and we should all be very mindful of this, necessarily limited to one party. Christian nationalists have been trying to infiltrate the entirety of the government for many years. And when I talk about the damages that they wish to do to our legal system, as exemplified by Project 2025, it isn't necessarily just one party that could be a problem with this. Because it isn't really coming from a party, it's coming from a religious movement whose members, like our members, could belong to any party. Yes, they're more prominent in one than the other, but they're not absent from the other. And one of the things that I want to say today Again, I would never tell you who you should vote for, but I am going to tell you you should vote. You should determine who is your preferred candidate, and you should go out and vote for them. And hello to Steve in the chat room. It's good to see you, Steve. Regardless of who it is, and regardless if it's the one I would endorse, you should pick the one who seems sensible to you. And of course, I'm talking to our U.S. viewers because that's the U.S. election coming tomorrow. And you should vote for that person. And if it's not the person I would choose, well, that's irrelevant. As a citizen, it is your right to vote for whomever you choose to vote for, and you should. But you should also really consider everything that's involved. And that's kind of what I wanted to talk about today. And there are several things that I think most people are not considering. The first one is the presidential election is not the only election that's happening, nor is it the only one that's important. A lot of people in the presidential election only think about who they're voting for as president. And this can be very counterproductive because we are not a monarchy, do not intend to become a monarchy, and therefore the president does not rule the country. They lead the executive branch of the government. The legislative branch is still very, very important and can advance or hinder any policy that the president might put forward. And voting for those so-called down ballot candidates is just as important. And knowing who they are and what they represent is just as important as the big one. And hello to Moondancer in the chat room. Moondancer says, I agree, but I have not been able to vote in the past because of where they hold the voting here is not secure, and they have tried to delay my mail-in, and I had to go to courthouse to demand it. Well, you know, I don't know where you live. I assume everything you're saying is true, but you did the right thing. You went to the courthouse and you got it. If you are a person in any of many situations where there may be forces trying to not only influence but perhaps prevent your voting, don't let them. There are ways, always, at least still now, to make sure you get to vote. But it may take more work in some cases. And I would strongly encourage you to do that. Some people want to vote early by mail. Some people want to go in person on the day. And I don't care. I say, do what works for you. And Moondancer says that what she's objecting to is that the local voting place is inside a Christian church, and she considers it considers that very, very insecure for her. Well, I get that, and she did the right thing. She mailed her vote in early. In most of the country, I think possibly all of the country, we have that option. If you have fear of going in person, use the mail-in option. I can understand why in some parts of the country you might feel insecure going to a church to vote. I can understand because I've seen people in some places in the country try to do it, that sometimes there are people not necessarily in the voting place, but leading up to it, who are there to try to intimidate people who might be voting opposite from themselves. So I get that. And be like Moondancer and get your mail-in ballot and vote early. I don't know that you can do that today, but it's the right thing to do. Don't just sit it out because there are other options. And Moondancer says, yes, we see that here a lot. And I could probably guess pretty accurately where in the country Moondancer is located. And probably so can others. But the point is, Moondancer did vote, even though Moondancer felt insecure about going to a particular voting place, and there was another option. There are a variety of options, especially depending where you are, and there's no one way you have to do it. Um, find the way that works best for you. And again, it's not just the presidential race that matters, they all matter. Where Congress ends up is just as important as where the presidency ends up. But people often forget this. And um, these candidates may not be as glamorous or as well publicized, but make sure you know who they are too. And don't vote blindly. And there are many things which for us, as pagans, and I know not necessarily everyone watching this program is necessarily a member of the pagan community, but the majority are. As a minority community, we have a number of issues that we need to be mindful of. It is um, there are a lot of people out there in the world who oppose the civil rights of our community, and there are a number of people voting in the current election based on certain kinds of religious points of view that have no room for us. And although um, we're not really in their rhetoric at the moment, we're going to be. You can already see people using our religious beliefs in politics to try to damage their opponents. And if you remember back a few weeks ago, everyone in certain places who objected to Taylor Swift's political endorsement were saying she's a witch, she practices magic. Well, she's not, as far as I know, but wouldn't it be great if she was? Um, from our point of view, um, I thought it was very interesting that Stormy Daniels apparently is a member of our community and has been for a long time, and was recently honored in Salem at the annual Samhain ritual. And good job, Salem witches. And Moondancer says Georgia has a pagan running for senator. Well, in that case, you probably should be paying attention to them. Make sure what they stand for. But if you find members of our community running, it's probably good to support them, because we have spent many years fighting for our civil rights. Now, younger pagans probably don't fully understand that, because if you're of a certain age, you've never not had those rights. But everything from our right to identify ourselves as churches, to our right to identify our religion as a religion in the military, to have um, pagan markers on military tombstones, to have pagan chaplaincy services in the nation's prisons, all of those were fights. Some of them lasted very long times. If you've followed Magic TV, now Corellian TV, for much of our 19 years, you'll remember stories about Patrick McCullum and others fighting for the rights of pagan prisoners, and the rights of pagan clergy to be able to minister to pagan prisoners, and how at one point parts of the country were trying to institute a, quote, tiered religious ranking, which would have excluded us. If you're as old as I am, you'll remember the Jesse Helms situation, the Helms Amendment back in the 1980s, that would have expressly disqualified any religion that included, that described themselves as witches or witchcraft from legal recognition. That failed. But, some of the people running for office today are likely to try to do it again. These have been long-term issues that we worked hard to gain. Um, Younger people may not realize it, but we have not had the same rights as our fellow citizens in many places and certainly throughout history. Um, the history of non-Christian, for convenience, we'll say pagan religions in this country has not been a friendly one. My own family were very secretive about their practices down until the 1970s. And I can remember living in that kind of environment. Um, and I'll tell you, that kind of secrecy is not good for children. So when you vote, you really need to think about the status of our community, the rights of our community, and where they're going and where these people stand and what they might do if they're elected. And again, it's not all on one side either, because those Christian dominionists, or they're now being called Christian nationalists, have been working both parties for years. They have had greater success with some than others, but they're not just in one place. And we need to be paying attention to this, or it will sneak up on us. I've been very pleased by how many people have taken notice of Project 2025, which outlines very clearly what they would like to do. Um, and I think you probably heard about it first from me, or if not from me, from Ed the Pagan. But you've heard about it now from all over the place. And I hope you're listening. We have been talking about this long before it was published in any form. And for many years, the pagan community would not listen. Um, Ed the Pagan was actually trained as an evangelical minister and knew about the basic intent for all of these political things to happen, and was warning people for a very long time, to no effect because they wouldn't listen. I hope people are listening now, because it's not too late, and we need to be mindful of it, and not just in one election. That's probably the most important thing I'm going to say to you today, that it's not one election we need to be mindful of. Because no matter who wins this election, the basic situation will not change. Um, the danger of Christian dominionism / Christian nationalism um, may be advanced or blunted, but it won't be absent. And they will be, if they don't um, come out dominant in either the presidential or the legislative elections, they will merely be regrouping for the next one. And we need to not let down our vigilance. And we need to um, be working for that future, not just this present. And this is a problem, I think, for a lot of pagans, thinking in terms of the future and not merely of the present. We tend, as a community, to often be very focused on just where we're at. Now, on Friday, I was talking about our upcoming super auction and our Karelian Community Church Elder Care Ministry, and how this is a long-term project. Just to get to the beginning, we're planning a year of working on it. And it will never cease needing to be worked on, because there'll never come a point that it can just stand on its own. It will always need support. It will always need to keep going forward. But this is true of everything. And it's certainly true of our political position. And Moondancer says, the thrift shop? Yes, the thrift shop is run by the Karelian Community Church, Karelian Church Incorporated. We're in the process of adding the term community to it, which is a parachurch, which means that it handles services for the Karelian community, one of which is going to be elder care. And we've been talking about this for, well, really ever since I had my coronary incident. But we have continued working forward. The whole point of the Gaia thrift shop is to support elder care. Is it doing that yet? Well, we're trying. We're working on it. But can it do that? I believe absolutely. Um, and other things that the church does are, of course, Correllian publishing and Correllian TV, what you're watching right now. These things used to be done through the Correllian Nativist Church, but now we have the parachurch to handle those, and the big church to handle the training of clergy and the administration. And these things are not in any way in opposition to one another. They are cooperative. And the administration has the full support of the parachurch. It's only there to serve the Correllian community in ways that, at a certain point, the Correllian Nativist Church chose to move away from. And that's how we got where we are. But these things, they're not overnight projects. They're all long-term projects. Correllian TV, it's in its 19th year. One of the reasons that we can continue producing content for you and can confidently look toward producing more is that we have so much experience doing it. But it's a constant thing. Doing this program is a constant thing. I can't do it once and think that will be enough. It must be done every day, or almost every day. I do sometimes do best of programs. But it's a constant requirement. And political vigilance is going to be a constant requirement too. If we wish to continue to have civil rights in this society, because there are a large number of people who don't want us to. That's true of us as pagans. It's true for those of us who are part of or supportive of the LGBTQ community, and for our people of color and many different ethnicities, all of whom are also threatened by that Christian dominionist movement. And if we don't pay attention to this, we may wake up one day and find ourselves not merely second-class citizens, but I think in much worse shape than that. And so my message to you is, as you go out to vote, think about these things, because they are the things that, if you're a pagan, they affect you directly. And they affect your future. And certainly they are what I am thinking about in deciding where to cast my vote. Again, I'm not going to tell you where I would cast my vote, nor am I going to encourage you to vote in any one direction. But I am going to encourage you to look at the issues and vote for the ones that are helpful to you and your community, to vote for the candidates that support the things that are helpful to you and your community, whichever ones they may be. And in the end, the most important thing of all is go and vote, regardless of who you're voting for. The ability to do that is certainly not universal around the planet, and it's not something that we should take lightly. Yes, on one hand, we do it every few years, but that doesn't mean that it could not be in danger, particularly for some of us. And we need, I think, to be mindful of that. And at that, I see that we are at 24 past the hour, about to be 25. So I want to take a moment for a message from our sponsors. And why are we doing this? Because we love our sponsors. We have great sponsors, which I say with no self-interest at all. Ready to unlock the secrets of the universe? Join me, Rev Don, for my metaphysical and magic auctions at Gaia Thrift at whatnot.com. Discover fascinating artifacts, mystical crystals, and rare and unusual books that could change your life. Don't miss this chance to bring a little magic into your world. Rev Don's Metaphysical and Magic Auctions, where the extraordinary can become yours. And thank you to our sponsors, Equinox Learning Hub and Rev Don's Metaphysical and Magic Auctions, which is me, and that Elder Care Ministry we were talking about. Our next auction will be this coming Sunday, November 10th, starting at 11 a.m. Central. Please join us for that. And it is going to be a super auction. It's going to run for many hours with many different items. And it will also, it will be in its way like a telethon that will also be talking and entertaining along the way. So it will be fun to watch, as well as many great items. So please join us for that. And that does it for today's sponsors. And leaves us a few minutes to kind of recapitulate what we've been saying today. And I always criticize and deeply disapprove of religious leaders trying to tell their membership how they should vote. And that, more than the legal requirement, is why I'm not going to do anything like that. But I do think it's appropriate to talk to you about the issues that I think are important. And that is perfectly appropriate legally, and I think morally. Then you make your own decisions. And, I think in general, that's how religion should be. The various figures of whatever priesthood or church tell you what they understand to be good, and then you, as a member of that congregation or tradition or whatever it may be, make your own decision. There should never be a point that you are a slave to just what other people would do. You have your own needs, you have your own life. However, it is good to talk about these things and to look at what may be important. And in this case, again, our civil rights are important. We have fought for them for a long time. And on one hand, we've rarely been in a better position than we are now, if ever. And yet at the same time, we're seeing Christian dominionists, Christian nationalists, basically attacking many of our events, protesting and so forth, disrupting. And that needs to be a little bit of a red flag for us on what we can expect if they rise to greater power than they've got. And Reverend Michael says, trust your heart when voting. Yes, and also trust your mind. And think about these issues. Although those of us who practice the spiritual arts, yes, your heart will lead you. You will be able to tell from the energy, I would think, what leads to the best result. Well, with that, I've pretty much completed my comments on this subject. And whoever you vote for, trust your mind and trust your heart and do what you think is the right thing. And no one can fault you for that, regardless of the choice that you make. But do your best and make your best decision. And that's all anyone can ask of you. So with that, let us close with our prayer, as we always do. And I will see you again tomorrow. Divine Mother Goddess, Divine Father God, beloved ancestors, we thank you for all that you do for us in our lives, and we rejoice in this walk we walk together. And we ask you to help us to have clear minds and clear thinking as we consider the various issues that confront us as individuals and as a community, so that we may make the most constructive choices in moving forward. Help us not to lose the rights that we have fought so hard to gain, regardless of what may happen in the outside world. Help us be ready to defend our rights if we need to, and first and foremost by voting. Beloved Mother Goddess, beloved Father God, beloved ancestors, we thank you with great thanks and great love, and knowing you are always with us still from respect, we thank you for your presence, and may you be blessed now and always. And may you be blessed now and